Cosmic Crack opens a new door to understanding the stars, moon, and planets for yourself and also for people in the news. Are they acting authentically or just faking it? You'll hear the inside scoop about those newsmakers, their mindset, and intentions. Host Jenny Stone shares her wit and wisdom about astrology right here each week on webtalkradio.net.
Hello and welcome to Cosmic Crack. Yes, you're on crack too. The only thing that's high around here is the vibration as we examine the consciousness of the universe. So, welcome to this edition. And let's talk about the concept and history of astrology. Because some people think it's very mystical and magical, and these signs are somehow imposed upon us. And that's not true. That's absolutely not true. Nothing could be more organic and down to earth. Do you believe there's 4 seasons? Do you believe that there are 12 new moons, 12 full moons that we can see? Then you believe in astrology because that's what it's based on. And looking back, this started 25,000 years ago. 25,000 years ago, when our ancestors were living in caves and they scratched on the walls and they scratched the symbol for the moon, going from new to full to crescent. And you can't mistake that for anything else. 25,000 years ago. But why did they do it? Well, they wanted to tick off the number of days between the new and the full. And they wanted to know the rotation through the year. And it was a matter of survival. This was before they had language. They could do facial expression, they could do hand gestures, they could pull somebody in and say, look, we're going into summer, we're going into winter. And it was really a matter of survival because you wanted to know when the fish would be most plentiful, when the animals were going to migrate north. When was it going to be another month before summer? And this predictive quality allowed them to cooperate and hunt together. And that is what gives humans domination over Earth, being able to work together and predict what's likely to happen. So you really want to know when winter is coming because, well, you better have enough food. You better know when food is available and when it's not. It's survival. It's about humans working together. Then, about 10,000 years ago, we started doing agriculture, planting seeds, harvesting. And then it became really, really important to be able to predict the seasons. And again, this was survival and it was cooperation, because if everybody got together to do the harvest and everybody got together to celebrate, then that was a big deal. And one thing I worried about, why was summer a water sign? Why is summer a water sign? Because you have to water the crops. You can't leave home in case there's a drought for 2 weeks and you come back and there's nothing left. So summer is a water sign. Isn't that interesting? But it's very important to know when to harvest. And harvest is the season for Virgo. And Virgo is picky. If you've ever known a Virgo, they're very picky. They're critical. They're practical. They're hardworking. They are willing to work towards a very practical goal. And that practical goal is choose the best so that you can store the harvest. Then we come to about 5,000 years ago. And that's when we notice the zodiac signs are being carved into buildings and stone walls. In Egypt, many of the pyramids and the buildings have zodiac signs all over them. And think about that. It took you a whole day to, and being a craftsman, to write a note to yourself, to notice, to be able to record what happened next. But then someone came up with parchment and a pen, and the written language started to be written down. And that was another big deal. Written language. That means that wisdom can be passed on, that calculations can be made, and you can write your thoughts onto parchment paper. There wasn't books. There was certainly no printing press. But 5,000 years ago, we have some manuscripts that showed the symbols of the zodiac. And Stonehenge was built 5,000 years ago. The pyramids had chambers where the light would only enter on the solstice. So these were ways of recording the calendar. Oh, and the Mayans carved their calendars into hillside. Imagine how much work that took. But with books, you could store the knowledge. You could copy the knowledge into another parchment, and you could give that to your friend. And about that time, we know, and before that we have no record, but around that time, humans noticed the planets. And they noticed the planets because they called them the wandering stars. Sometimes in the morning you'll get Venus rising. You'll get Mercury all over the place. You'll get Mercury stopping and going backwards. Ooh, how interesting that is. And back then, there was no TV, there was no movies, there was no Instagram. So they started telling stories about the planets and about the movement of the planets. And they noticed that the planets would sometimes line up with the winter solstice, the summer solstice, the equinox. And it didn't take much to go from 4 seasons to 12 new moons and come up with signs that showed the relationship between these movements. And the signs were basically the seasons 12 new moons, and it told humans what to expect next. It was a calendar. You believe in calendars, right? When to plant, when to harvest, when to store food for winter. Aries is the springtime, Virgo is the harvest. Capricorn is when you know if you're going to survive the winter, if there's enough food. That's when the harsh, frozen, maybe your local water supply was frozen. And putting the planets into the signs, that took someone pretty darn smart. That took a lot of calculations. But once you have it, once you have the document, you can predict ahead, which is another big deal. You can predict the milestones and you work together. And that really helps the harvest. That helps the hunting, fishing, gatherers. That's when it takes brains. Not just physical strength, but brains. And that's what makes astrology a good tool. It has nothing to do with celestial imposition of signs. It has to do with data that's collected over thousands of years, based on the seasons and the planets, but putting it all together requires a brilliant intellect. And let's be clear, human intellect making sense of the universe, a universe, a seasonality that already exists and has order in it. It's not something that's been imposed on us. There's nothing, well, there's something celestial, but it's really practical stuff. So astrology is an understanding that grew out of the need to predict the seasons. And the seasons are the natural order of things. That already exists. The zodiac signs are not something that's been imposed. It grew organically out of needing to know what the weather is likely to be. Not magical. We don't have to believe in it. It's something that exists, and human brains are looking to understand the sequence. Just as we look to understanding the planets and what kind of energy is being sent out by the different planets and how each is attached to the seasonal changes. Let's say that again, because it's really fundamental to understanding astrology. The signs grew out of the seasons and the weather changes. Springtime is the time to plant. Summer is the growing season. And you better be able to predict for that. Winter is conserving the food supply. And the planets embody different kinds of energy. Male is Mars, Venus is female. And let's stop and talk about something that we touched on in the last podcast, because I may have suggested that it's male against female, and that's not correct. We're coming to a revolution in human history when it's not about male versus female, but rather a time when traditional gender roles are getting blurred. And we have to cooperate. We have to put together the traditional male energy and join with the female energy to produce a powerful kind of thinking that's creative and cooperative. After all, it takes male and female coming together to create babies. right? That's what it takes to birth a human being. And right now we're birthing a revolution in human thinking. A revolution in human thinking, intellect. This is the next step. We can't just go on destroying each other. We have to turn war into peace. And let's talk more about the revolution soon. And we'll talk more about the signs. And I'd like to give you some other ways of thinking about the signs and maybe understanding the kind of energy that goes behind each sign. And we'll talk soon. Because it's all about storytelling, isn't it? I wish you a good day. Thank you for listening. Let's get together again soon. Thank you.